Welcome to Totally Over the Spectrum, where we dive into embracing autism through understanding and support.
Hi, and welcome to episode 3. We're talking about autism in education. That's your wheelhouse.
Yes, it is. Woohoo. Okay. Education. It is an imperfect system. It is evolving. It's growing. It's adapting to new research, and it requires collaboration on everybody's part. It requires parent, teacher, student, and community collaboration in order to make it as effective as could possibly be. In saying that, the education system is a live document. And so don't be afraid to voice your opinion on it in a polite way, and have open communication. If there are two things I'm going to say when it comes to relating to your child and education is open communication and advocacy. You have to advocate for your child, and you have to have clear, open, welcoming communication. And I think here is an area of communication and on that you can speak to from a parent's perspective when dealing with educators.
So that's kind of tricky, right? The fine line between advocating and stepping on people's toes, because I've seen parents go in guns blazing and say, we this is what our child needs and we know our human rights. And the problem that I have with that is that teachers are still human beings. If you walk in making demands, they're less likely to want to help you. And that's going to translate to them being less likely to really want to help your child. You're going to be that parent where they're like, oh no, that parent's coming in again. And that's not to say not to advocate when it's necessary, but certainly take a step back. Let things unfold, right? Let's see where it's going. And if they're not meeting your child's needs, that's when you can step in and say, hey, I don't think that this is the best possible course of action. Is there something else we can do?
Absolutely. And I think you brought up a good point where saying when you go in guns blazing, what ends up happening from an educator standpoint of view is we follow the book, right? We follow everything that needs to be and implement everything that needs to be implemented for that student. And we're so focused on, preventing a mistake or an error to occur that we miss the biggest component, which is building that key relationship. So effective education strategy is building a key relationship with your student, because when you can relate to that student, when you build that effective relationship and one that's based on trust, and especially kids with autism, if you don't have that trust factor in place, it doesn't matter how good of an educator you are, you're not going to achieve optimal unless you have that child's trust.
100%. Yeah, that's absolutely true. The best educators that I've worked with are ones that have understood my kids, right? They've had a sort of a personal relationship with them, right? They got to know them. They got to understand them. It wasn't simply, take out the box of autism equipment and throw it against, see what sticks, right? It wasn't that. It wasn't like, well, your child has autism, so let's bring out the weighted vest, like that. There's no one size fits all with autism, right? Every single child is completely different. So if you don't get to know that child, you are not going to know what strategies work for them.
Absolutely. Which also brings me to the point of sharing of information, right? As a parent, you're quite reluctant to share a diagnosis because you're afraid of your child being labeled. But from an educator's perspective, when there is not a diagnosis in place, it makes it very difficult for us to implement everything that we can in order to aid that student, because we're restricted to a helping that child that hasn't got a diagnosis on paper, right? So we're not there to judge you. We're there to help you. And by having a diagnosis in place, it opens a lot of doors. It most certainly does, right?
Parents are afraid of the label, right? A lot of parents are afraid of the label because they're worried that their kids are going to get bullied. They're worried that they're singling them out, or they're in a state of denial because they don't want to deal with that for whatever reason. And I don't think they understand that the school system, there's bureaucracy. It's an institution. So in order for a school to determine how many hours of manpower, person power, I don't know what the proper term for that is now, how many hours they get to allocate to a particular school is needs-based. So the principal of the school has to say, I have this many students and they require this much support. And then it's not like, oh, hey, I have Peter and Peter requires this. It's like, I have a student and this student requires this much support. And then that school is allocated so many people, which the principal gets to distribute, right?
Absolutely. So the allocation is based on the student's needs, right? And a formal diagnosis clearly defines what those students' needs are. And this is supported by the Ministry of Education when they put in a framework for policies and practices and memorandum that states how school boards must implement learning for students in special needs, right? So they have a framework that says ABA must be incorporated into the learning, and therefore the student needs to meet these certain criterias. So by having a formal diagnosis, it sets those criterias. It takes that guesswork and eliminates that from that. So it automatically says, okay, we have this student with this criteria, and it falls under this, framework. And then not only does it affect the school, but it also affects the parent support outside of the school and the community. So these frameworks are put into place in order to help effective collaboration between the school, the community, and the parents. So, definitely please be open to wanting to share a diagnosis, because it helps, the community, it helps the schooling, and it most certainly helps you as a parent, access the resources that are available based on those criterias.
Yeah, it's not as simple as the parent says, well, my child needs help, you need to give it to them. A teacher's hands are tied. If they get an EA for their classroom, it's based on needs. It's not based on want.
Correct. Absolutely. And those needs have to be supported by documents, and they need to be supported by professional documents, right? So, we as educators can say, with our experience, we understand that the areas of needs are here and the areas of strength are here. But that is just experience talking. That's not a formal diagnosis. That is not a professional, placing those, providing those documentations to the school to say, yes, this is actually correct and this is what needs to be done.
For me, I didn't know anything about autism when Alex was at the very end of junior kindergarten. So that was June 2009. And I'd never heard of autism. I didn't know what it was. And the teacher asked for a meeting, and she had sort of a list of red flags that she had found from Alex's behavior over the course of the school year. And of course I kept it because that's what I do. So I have this list of red flags that the teacher gave me, June 2009. And it's called Observations by Alex's Teacher. Tiptoe walking, poor eye gaze, repeats questions asked of him, difficulty with transitions, very emotional, teary, limited interaction with peers, doesn't know classmates' names, poor fine motor skills, clumsy, poor social skills, poor self-help skills. It's a long list, I'm sorry. And unaware of things around him. Now, of course, I can look at that now and go, oh, autism checklist, but I didn't know at the time. So the recommendation was for Alex to see his family doctor and for parents to ask for Alex to be referred to a pediatrician. And then a little disclaimer at the bottom saying, we want to eliminate any physical factors. Now, a school cannot say, hey, we think this is autism. They cannot do that. They
No,
are
we
not
cannot.
qualified. So I take my list to my family doctor, and the family doctor says, sure, I'll send him to a pediatrician. I said, okay. I'm waiting, nothing. I said, can you tell me what this means? I don't know what this means. I don't know what I'm looking at. And she said, well, when I look at that list, I see autism. I'm like, okay. And then she turned around and I left because I'm like, well, I don't think I'm going to bother looking that up until I know exactly what's going on. So I'll wait for the pediatrician. But if the school hadn't have given me that list, I wouldn't have known. Alex wouldn't have gotten help as early as he did. And because I went through that process, I was able to look at Peter and say, oh, I think we also have these same things going on here. So Peter got thrown into the mix really early because I had this list for Alex. So I had them both diagnosed at the same time. Peter didn't have to go through all of these hoops to get his diagnosis. He was also needed more support, being non-speaking. So that, for me, that was great because if they hadn't have come to me and said, hey, like I could have been rejecting what they were giving me. I could have said, I don't want to hear this. I don't want to do this. I don't know I don't find any of these things to be a problem. But that wouldn't have served Alex. And certainly it wouldn't have helped me get Peter support he needed at the age of 2 instead of him getting support at the age of 5. Mm-hmm. Right?
And I think you brought up a good point over there that a lot of parents look at the list that is provided to them by an educator and take it personally, right? It is not intended for you to harm anybody, right? This list is just to bring a sense of awareness to say, in a class of 30 kids, normal atypical behavior is this, right? Your student or your child, does not function in the atypical manner. Is there something we can do to help your child, regulate better and meet your own child's needs? Because there are these lagging skills. So, I think parents need to look at it that we're coming from a position of wanting to help. But we are not doctors, and therefore we cannot provide you our opinion on it. We can just say, these are our observations. You need to go and have this confirmation or non-confirmation.
Yeah, follow this down.
Yes.
See where this leads by
Absolutely.
the professionals.
Absolutely. So I think parents need to just accept it for us wanting to be helpful, right? We're not trying to look at you and say it's your fault, that you're a bad parent. It has nothing to do with that. We're just telling you, in a class of 30 kids, your child is not meeting these certain criteria of guidelines set out by pediatricians, by doctors, to say atypical progress is here, here, and here. If they're not meeting those, what seems to be the barriers that your child might have in place or might not have in place, that's preventing them from obtaining these levels. That's all it is. So it's not something that should be taken personally.
Yeah, I didn't read it as something to be defensive about. I didn't know I was autistic, so I just took it as face value, like, oh, these are opposites. I don't read intent very well. So it wouldn't have occurred to me that this was a personal attack, right? So I just took the list and said, well, I can see how that might be true. I don't really see that happening. So I sort of went through it and said to myself, what do I see and what don't I see? But it never occurred to me to take it personally. To me, it was just a list of things. So when I went through the process, I wasn't even upset about it. I didn't know there was something to be upset about, right? Until other people were upset about it.
And I think part of that not being upset is because you were able to connect with a lot of what your kids did, because being a person who has autism, you could relate to what your kids were doing, and it was the norm for all three of you.
I didn't
Right?
know I was putting things in place to regulate myself, which in turn help my kids to regulate themselves. Like, I need a lot of structure. I need more structure than they do. Because not only am I trying to regulate myself, I'm trying to create an environment which is good for them. Like, I'm looking after three people, not just one person.
Yes.
Right? So I tend to get dysregulated faster than they do. If you walk in and say to them, oh, hey, we're going to go out and we're going to go do something, they'll be like, okay, let's go. You could walk in right now and say, okay, we're going to go to the aquarium. And they'd be like, oh, okay, let's go. If you said that to me, okay, hey, Kim, we're going to go to the aquarium, I'd be like, I'm not prepared for that. Details. What do I need to do? What do I need to wear? What do I need to bring? And I would run through a list of things, and I would be completely overwhelmed. I need some prep time to get on board with doing things. And they don't. They don't need it that way. And maybe that's because I do it. I always make sure that, oh, you need a drink, I'll make sure you have your drink. Like, all of those details. Yeah. They don't have to do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, for them, every time I heard, oh, Alex is having trouble with transitions, or Peter's having trouble with transitions, I'd think, they never seem to have trouble with transitions. Like, I don't see that as an issue. I think mostly they were issues with understanding what they were doing and why they were doing it, rather than moving on to doing something different than what they were currently doing. Mm-hmm. So yeah, the point there is that as a parent, it's not personal. The school needs to have an official diagnosis in order to get the tools and supports that they need to in turn give them to their student.
Absolutely. And I think the other aspect of it is communication, right? Being an effective communicator to your, to the school, to the community, to any a professional that works with your child, right? So you've got to be willing to share, like, with your educator, like, oh, so and so's on the bus today, and we didn't have a great start. That little bit of information helps an EA like me to be prepared far more effectively than, and said, okay, this is my schedule for today. This is what I was aiming to accomplish today. But little Johnny over here did not have a good start and is extremely emotionally dysregulated and is coming in hot. So let's know that, I was going to push the boundaries on trying to achieve this next layer of learning. We're going to take that off the board today, because I'm not going to now set him up for failure. I want to set him up for success. And I know that stretching this boundary today is most definitely going to, get him far more dysregulated. So having that crucial piece of information has just helped me now rejig my schedule in order to make little Johnny's day successful. Because a lot of people don't realize that when you're an effective educator, your day starts long before your student even gets there. You're planning, you're planning what their learning is going to be like for that day. And you look at what they had learned previous to that, and the foundation, the success of one learning is going to be the foundation for the next. And you scaffold that learning throughout the day. And so you set up that scaffolding in hopes to achieve that. But when I go outside to greet my students, I'm starting to evaluate what my day is going to look like from the moment I set eyes on my student. Are they coming in happy? Are they coming in sad? Are they coming in angry? Are they coming completely dysregulated? Are they hungry? Are they tired? I've got to start bringing all of these variables into it in order to make an informed decision on how to structure my day in order to achieve the best results for my student.
And it doesn't mean that they're not going to learn anything that day.
No. And learning doesn't mean that they're there to learn academically. No. They're there to learn how to function in society as well, how to live life. and all aspects of living, right? So it's not just the academical aspect. When you're working in special education, it's not just the academics. So as an educator in special education, you're not connecting the learning to the regular Ontario curriculum. You're following the guidelines by alternative curriculums. And you're taking those alternative curriculums and you're building an IEP, which is an individualized education plan that's tailor-made specifically for your child, based on their areas of strengths, based on their areas of needs, based on the base on which they're coming into. It takes a lot of input, and the more accurate and the more details that is provided to us from the parents who know the kids the best, the better we can tailor make an IEP. So effective communication is crucial, because that just doesn't relate to the teacher, it relates to the occupational therapist, speech and language pathologist, the physiotherapist. All of these people now have to have the same information in order to collaboratively work together to get your student or their student and your child to be as successful as they possibly can.
I think one of the hardest things for me was that the speech and language pathologist doesn't talk to the occupational therapist, doesn't talk to the physiotherapist, and I had to learn each of their languages because they're all different. And I had to coordinate that with the school. So even though the speech and language pathologist, once they're in school, comes to the school, it's not like they're getting the speech and language pathologist working with your child. That the SLP comes in, they do an assessment, they give some tools to the teacher who passes them on to the educational assistant. If there's a good working relationship between the EA and the teacher, the EA might be present for that because really they're the ones hands-on working with the student the most, right?
Yep.
And then it's up to them to implement it. So I was shocked when I found out that EAs don't need formal education.
No, they do not need formal education. And I agree with you. I think, can you imagine sending your child to a school to be taught by a teacher who does not have the credentials or the licensing to teach? What would your thoughts be on that? You'd be like, what? You don't have a teacher's degree? Why are you teaching? The same thing. You're working with the most vulnerable students in the school board. I believe that you should have a degree. I went to school. I went to Sheridan College, who offers an amazing program for EAs. And it teaches you everything that you need to know to effectively support these students. And what strategies to use and when to use them, how to use them. And, how to collaborate with teachers, how to collaborate with occupational therapists and everybody else that brings in the supports that they need. So I would love to see, like I said, its education system is evolving. I would love to see them evolve to the point where an EA requires an EA degree, an education degree from amazing colleges out there. So we all know what strategies to use, when to use it, and how to use it. Because if it's not done properly, you're going to do more harm than good.
That is a big deal. That is absolutely true. And it's hit and miss, right? Whether you have an EA, EAs get on-the-job training, right? So they get to, on PA days and the professional activity days, that you do modules and that sort of thing. But, I mean, whether they learn it or not, they get paid the same amount, right? Yeah. So you're getting people who are coming in because they don't require any formal education to have this position and they need a job. And some people come in and they want to learn. They are keen to learn the things. They want to do their job well. And you get other people who are going in to just do their job. And there are some people who are doing like the bare minimum not to get fired, right?
Oh, absolutely. And that's not just a problem that exists in the education field. That's a problem that exists everywhere, right? And it doesn't matter which work environment that you're in. There are people that go above and beyond. There are people who do what is requested of them. And like you said, there are people who do what it takes not to get fired. So I think this is just an issue all round. But when it comes to molding the future generation, I think you need to take that a lot more seriously. And I think you need to be held to a higher standard in order to have these young people, these minds, and to be molded into being functional adults in society. And it just doesn't mean that it's the academics learning. No, there's so much more that you need to teach than there is, in numeracy or literacy. So I think both educational assistants, ABA, we all have to go and get specific training and degrees in what we're supposed to be doing. That's my belief, and I would love to see that across the board.
It was interesting to me to find out that even special education teachers, they specialize to be able to do that, but there's 3 levels. And
Yes.
you only have to have the first one to actually teach a classroom.
Yes, absolutely.
So it is not ubiquitous that just because someone's a special education teacher, that they have as much training as, say, another person.
Yeah. And when you start to go into the field of special education, you're dealing with, I can't even find words, but you're dealing with kids that are so diverse in all of their needs, right? So you're not just dealing with a student that has autism. You're dealing with a student that has Down syndrome. You're dealing with a student that is MID, which is mild intellectual disability, or a learning disability, or dyslexic. So you need to keep and advancing that learning in order to understand and meet each of these students' needs. And each one of these areas require a lot of knowledge.
And that knowledge is evolving.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think that it is crucial for teachers in special education and EAs, in order to do their jobs effectively, require a certain amount of training. And especially EAs, because we can be placed anywhere from kindergarten right up to grade 12. That's a huge spectrum right there. And we are not only having to learn the Ontario curriculum and how to teach it, and break it down into teaching components. And, you're doing an analysis on what the student learns, and then you're going to understand what aspect of it that they know and they don't know, and then what type of teaching strategy you're going to use to implement that learning. And how are you going to structure and scaffold that learning? And so we're not only having to do the Ontario curriculum, we're also having to learn a alternative curriculum and how that affects the student and how to implement all of that. And people often think that special education only applies to students with learning disabilities. They forget that you're also dealing with students who are gifted, right? Students that are learning at and have an understanding of academics that are way, way beyond their grade limit. So as an educational system, you have to have a solid foundation of that learning from kindergarten right up to grade 12.
When Alex finally got his diagnosis, I think he was going into grade 1, and his EA was phenomenal. And I am so lucky to have had her, because she came out and she talked to me and she said, okay, she said, they've implemented a PEC system for Alex with a picture exchange communication system. And she said, that's beneath him. And she was absolutely right. Alex was hyperlexic, which means he was reading and comprehending and writing well above his age level. So I think he was 6, and his comprehension was at age 10 or 11 at that time, which is a huge discrepancy. And she said, he doesn't need this. He needs written instructions not pictures. She said that this isn't working for it. And if she hadn't, I wouldn't have known that I could even ask for that. I'm not a teacher. And I was still learning about autism. I had no idea what I should be asking for, what I should be looking for, or what tools and strategies they should be learning for him. I really relied on the school system to be able to tell me, this is the next step that we should be doing. This is the tools. These are the tools that we should be using, and the strategies we should be using to help Alex to be successful.
So there are teachers that are specifically put in place to help build those bridges between parents, teachers, community, and student, and they are CERTs, the special education resource teachers. They are the connectors of of the learning for that student with, additional support, whether it be with OT, SLP, their homeroom teacher, building an IEP, whether creating a safety or behavior plan. These teachers are the foundation to, are the bridge builders between administration, parents, the student, the teacher, IEPs. So this is one person that you need to be able to really make an effort in building core relationships with, having open communication with, because they are the ones that are in your corner, and they're the ones that are fighting for your child's needs. And they're ones that have to go to all of the meetings, the team meetings and SRTs, and just to say, hey, this is the student, these are the needs, this is the diagnosis, this is the formal diagnosis, this is what we need to have in place. They're the voice for your child. So get to know these people, get to help understand what their needs are in order for them to do their jobs effectively, and collaborate with them. Have open communication, be honest, and build that trust, build those bridges, and, success does happen.
I was extremely lucky with the CERT because she was absolutely amazing, and she was a strong advocate for all of her students. But I felt like, especially with Peter being non-speaking, I didn't know what happened in a day, right? Unless I got communication from the school, his day was blank for me. He couldn't tell me what's going on, what happened, if someone was mistreating him or he had a bad day. I would not know. So unless I had the teacher writing the communication book, or the EA writing or texting or something, whatever that communication was. But the CERT and I actually became good friends, and we're still good friends. And she was able to compartmentalize that, where she'd say, okay, I'm putting on my professional hat right now. And we could separate that. So there was no overlap. She was very professional in everything she did, but I was able to go to her and be completely honest and say, look, there's an EA that's working with Peter that, a substitute EA for Peter that I do not like this person. I don't think that this person is good at their job. I think that this person is actually being harmful in the way that they are working with Peter. And if that's the only person you can get to fill that position in a particular day, tell me and I'll keep Peter home. I won't send him that day. It was that bad for me that I said, no, never are we doing that again. And that's rare, really. For me, that was rare. But that was one of the things where I could say that to her and she would get it. And she would say, I hear what you're saying. Yeah. Because sometimes schools don't have a choice of who picks up a job, yeah. Right? Because someone could call in last minute being sick. You wake up in the morning, you're sick, and you call in, and the school has to fill that position in maybe less than an hour.
Yep, absolutely. So that's where it goes back to, making sure that the people that they hire, educators that they hire, know what they're doing, have an understanding of what it is that they're doing and how to do it effectively, right? Because when you're working with the most vulnerable students, you need to know that this person is capable of implementing a safety plan or a behavior plan when that student becomes dysregulated, to make sure that student stays safe, other students stay safe, and so are they. So these are, I'm a huge advocate for wanting the school system to actually hire EAs that have gone to school and actually got a degree in education in order to be able to do the job that these kids need.
And I think, to be fair to teachers and EAs, when you are a substitute, you are coming in and you might only have an hour prep time, right? To be able to read over the needs of the students in that class at that particular time. So I don't expect, miracles from a substitute teacher or EA coming in, but I expect that, the level of dysregulation that I saw from that one is unacceptable to me. But Alex, in about grade 2, had a substitute teacher one day, and he is extremely slow. He's a very slow mover. He is sort of on his own timeline, not bothered about things. So he was the last one to exit the building. It was a ghost town. Everybody else had gone home, and I was sitting there with Peter in the stroller waiting for Alex to come out. And he came out with a substitute teacher. So she was lovely. She was pleasant. She came out and she said hi, and she introduced herself, and she said, Alex had a bit of an upset today, which I understand is teacher speak for he was crying today. He was very upset. But I know that you don't know me as a parent, so you minimize that impact, right? You're not going to come out and specifically say, oh, he was on the floor crying for 20 minutes. No, they're not going to say that, right? So we had a bit of an upset today. And I said, Alex, what happened? And they had these pegboards in the classroom that you put elastics on and you make pictures out of. And one of the students had taken a round one and made a picture of Pac-Man. And Alex said, well, I thought I would, one up that a little bit and make one in the picture of a ghost. And I guess the student in the classroom said to him, well, they're not ghosts in Pac-Man, they're octopuses. And Alex got very upset. And I get that. That makes perfect sense to me. For people with autism, it's not about being right. It's about being correct. So you get extremely upset when someone argues with you about a fact that you know to be true and they're trying to tell you it isn't. And for some reason, we have this need that we want you to know the correct information. Like, why wouldn't you want that? Why wouldn't you want the correct information? I can't. I know now that let it go. But you still have this internal feeling of distress that people do not want the correct information. So Alex became dysregulated and he was crying. And so the teacher said to me, she said, I tried to explain to Alex, and she's giving me that sort of teacher speak and that sort of like, we're on the same page, right, Mom? And I'm looking at her and she said, I was trying to explain to Alex that it's like an art class where we all have different opinions of what a picture might look like. And it's okay that we have different opinions, right? And I was listening to her and I knew what she was aiming to get. And so I listened. And after she was done, I looked at Alex and I said, Alex, you're absolutely right.
Yeah. I was smiling because I knew kind of like Alex was like,
yeah,
okay.
He needed to know that he was correct. Yeah, they're ghosts. We know that. That is a fact. Yes. So you are correct. Those are ghosts. And I think what your teacher is trying to say is that it's okay for that student to be wrong. It's okay for that student to think that there's something else. It's not hurting anybody. Everybody's okay. I said, you know what the truth is, and that's enough. You do not have to convince people. There are going to be people that you can't convince. Mm-hmm. So it's okay for them to be wrong, Alex. It's okay for them to think it's something that it's not. And I could see the teacher's face fall a little bit because I didn't quite go in the direction that she was trying to go. Mm-hmm. But black and white thinking, it's right or it's wrong, right? And for some things, it is black and white, right? But the most important part was that he needed to be acknowledged, right? He needed to know that, yes, this information you have is correct, but it's okay for someone to be incorrect. That's all right.
Absolutely. And, going on incorrect and it's okay to be wrong. Don't forget, teachers and educators are human. We're not always going to get it right. We're going to come across situations and circumstances that we've never encountered before. And we're going to pick either go left or go right. And, and sometimes we're not going to pick the ideal direction. But don't be so harsh when we do make a mistake. We're learning too. And, you know, as much, and that's when open and effective communication comes into place, is building that relationship. And it's when both parties have a good foundation of communication that's open and respectful, an educator is more willing to say, hey, I thought this would going to be work today for these reasons, but clearly it did not. And, the intent was for me to obtain this with your child, but it didn't go too good. And we didn't have the best day as a result of it. I learned that this is not a strategy that's going to work with your child. So the good thing is I learned something else about your child, and I learned something that doesn't work. And, and as, and I hope as a parent that if I came to you and said, this is what happened and this is, this was upsetting for your child, but, I've learned something. I hope that you appreciate that.
Well, I would think as a parent that you would say, this is also a piece of information for me, right? You've tried something and it didn't work. And then we can brainstorm and say, well, why didn't that work? Mm-hmm. And maybe I might know, maybe I might not. Or I might say, oh, well, that usually works for me at home. But people need to understand that strategies that you use are fluid. Something that works today might not work tomorrow.
Yep. And they might work for one person and not another.
Right. And it might not work now, but it might work again in the future. Right? Because kids are not static, right? They're dynamic. They are always changing. And how, their tolerance for things is different. Just like adults, our tolerance for things are different on different days, depending what's going on.
Yep.
And that's no different for them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, once again, effective communication. The other aspect of it we were talking about is advocating for your child's needs, right? It is important to, pardon the pun, educate yourself, right? Educate yourself on the policies, the practices that fall in within the framework that the Ministry of Education sets for each school, for all schools, and how each and every school and each and every school board implements that, because all of them do not implement them the same way. So as a parent, please do some due diligence. Please understand how your school board operates, how your school operates, and right the way down to how does the classroom operate, right? And based on all of that information, advocate for what your child needs, not wants, but needs for success. And I think that you are able to maybe share on how sometimes you have advocated for your child.
Well, I think a good thing to know is that the principal gets to dictate certain aspects of EA allocation. So before Peter was in your class, he was in mainstream, and he had an EA in the morning and a different EA in the afternoon. And that afternoon EA had some health issues. So there were a lot of substitute EAs that were coming through. It was basically a revolving door. And that was not the best learning environment for Peter. So I knew that he had a solid EA in the morning, so he would learn things, but I knew that the afternoons were a bit of a write-off. And there wasn't really anything I could do about that, right? I couldn't change that. So that's one thing that I sort of had to accept was going to happen. But that doesn't mean never advocate. Like, it's a balancing act, right?
Yes, it is.
And you have to go with what feels right for you. But I would really dissuade people from going in guns blazing and demanding things, because I think that's going to backfire. I don't think it's human nature to get defensive. So I think if I was going to ask for something, I would go in and say, hey, I don't think that this is working. Is there something else we could be doing? And come in providing solutions if I had them, right? And I think people would be more likely to work with you than if you come in and say, I know my human rights, and I know that you have to do this, and this is what my child needs.
Yeah, because like I said earlier, as an educator, you become so focused on making sure that you're meeting all the criterias from a legal standpoint, because now you have a parent who says, I understand my legal rights, that you keep it, it becomes a very sterile relationship, right? And it places a barrier between building those human relationships, right? Whether it be with the student and whether it be with the parent. And those are crucial for learning.
That doesn't mean that I've never done it. So high school is a completely different environment altogether. And I dislike very much the transition from Peter going to a life skills class and then going into high school. It's like sending someone from grade 1 to grade 9 and putting them in a grade 9 environment. They're not going to be successful. None of the things that were in place in grade school were put into place in high school. It's a different format of learning. And he didn't do well. Imagine that. He did not do well in grade 9.
It is a huge jump. It is a huge jump from elementary into high school. And it can be overwhelming for both student and parents, especially those that require a lot of support.
Yeah, he acted out. He pulled the fire alarm one day. And Alex was in that high school at that time, and he came home very upset. He said, someone pulled the fire alarm at school today, Mom, and it was like minus 17 Celsius, which is like 1 degree Fahrenheit outside. It was cold, and you don't have time to go get your jacket. Alex was not happy about that. I said, oh, yeah, that was your brother. And then you would think that the school would have sort of picked up on this as maybe a possible behavior. But the next week, Peter took it up a notch, and he ran from the classroom, and he went from the top floor of the school to the basement, and he pulled 5 fire alarms along the way. And I was a little bit proud, because I thought, well, that takes some good planning. Like that wasn't just random pulling. Like, he mapped that out and had a plan in place. So part of me was a little bit like, first of all, it's your job to keep an eye on him, especially after we've had the conversation saying that he's an opportunistic runner. So if you have to pay for the fire department to come in and reset those, that's on you. Right? Maybe now you will take me seriously, right? So, and also planning. I mean, that's a skill. So, yeah.
Peter and I have a very good relationship.
He does.
Unique one.
Yes. But recently, Peter did get good teachers, right? So after that, he did have really good teachers for a couple of years, and then this last one was no. That was a hard no. So when I went to the parent-teacher interview, I was discussing with them that Peter had started self-harming. And the teacher said, well, we see regression due to hormones. And I'm sitting there going, what? That's not a thing. What do you... And of course, I'm overwhelmed now in that moment, because someone is giving me information that I know is not true, but I'm not one to be able to process that in the moment. I have to kind of go away to process something like that and then come back. So I said, Peter's bored. And I, of course, went away after this interview and processed it and made an appointment to see the program coordinator, whom I have a good relationship with. And I said, this is not a good environment for Peter. And I said, usually I'm very politically correct when I talk about things, but I don't know if I was just getting overloaded. I was very upset that Peter was harming himself. So I said, I'm going to say some very strongly worded things about one of your teachers, and I don't need you to write it down, and I don't need you to go to that teacher, and I don't need you to talk to them about it, because I don't think that's actually going to be beneficial. I don't think they are going to change their behavior. So what I need is for Peter to be moved to another classroom.
But you were able to have that candid conversation with them because you had built a relationship.
Yes.
And you had effective communication, and you were a person that's advocated for Peter and Alex in the past openly and without guns blazing. That, you put all of that into place, and that's how you were able to effectively, impact positive change. And those are one of the circumstances where advocating strongly for your child is is absolutely crucial when any self-harm behavior comes into play.
Yeah, that was a non-negotiable for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I
Right.
agree with you on that one.
And I really don't think we're going to change people's behavior, right? That's not suddenly going to change. What they're going to do is hide it from me, or try to, or give me false reasons why these things are happening. No, I will not settle for that. So you're right. Being able to have an open conversation about that was critical. And because I did have that relationship, Peter was able to be moved to another classroom very quickly, like well above and beyond how fast I thought it was going to happen, and where he's perfectly content.
Happy. And when you're happy, you're more engaged in your learning. And when you're more engaged in your learning, you intend to learn better and retain it better. So for me, it's like, it's a win-win all around, right? So kudos for you for being a good advocate over there.
It's not always easy. And I'm not one to yell or get really upset in the moment, because usually I get overwhelmed.
But I think, like you said, when you yell and you go in guns blazing, all you're going to do is get that other person's back up, right? And you're going to, it's going to be counterproductive to what you're trying to achieve. So, you need to just take it easy, go in prepared, have your ducks in order, and state the fact, try and pack the emotion out of it. And you will definitely get a lot accomplished when you do that.
Yeah, you can be firm without being nasty.
Yes.
But honestly, if push had come to shove, I would have started to get nasty, because I'm not going to let Peter start to harm himself, right? Like, it's a juggling act. It's a lot of dancing around. It's nothing is ever really as straightforward and as easy as we would like it to be.
Yep, absolutely. I agree. We're also talking about effective communication between parents and educators, and achieving goals and platforms of learning. And while I had mentioned that, a particular situation came to mind where I hope you're open to discussing how effective communication can achieve some big goals in learning. And I think the story that I'm particularly thinking about is the very first year that Peter came into my classroom. And I'm hoping that you share that story with our listeners, and how effective communication and support, building that support with each other, can accomplish big things. Certainly huge for you.
I know what you're talking about. So what we're talking about is getting Peter toilet trained.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. So communication is important, but mirroring, right, the consistency across home and school is really what gets things done.
Absolutely. And being able to effectively mirror each other, you have to have a strong foundation of good, clear, open communication.
Okay, so Peter was 10 when he went into your classroom, and he was not toilet trained. He was in pull-ups. And like I'd said before, I had a revolving door of EAs. Like, there was no way to get school to be consistent for him up until that point, to be able to mirror anything. So I didn't actually know a lot about a life skills class. So you came to me and said, I think we should take on toileting, because you took to Peter very quickly. You understood him very quickly. You figured him out very quickly.
Yeah, I did.
Right? You did. You have a connection.
By the second day.
Right? Yep. Yes. And he figured you out very quickly. Right? And you do have a very special bond, which I'm not saying everyone's going to have, but I feel extremely fortunate that you had that. So you said, let's take on toileting. I said, really? We can do that? Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to do whatever, please. I've tried everything, literally everything. So please bring me something new. And I think you had gone what I consider to be above and beyond, because you went onto the internet and you were looking for strategies that you knew that I hadn't yet implemented. And you stumbled across an Australian website, I think. And basically the premise was to not praise anything and not criticize anything. Everything had to be neutral. It was
Absolutely.
neutrality. So if he used the toilet, there was no talking about it. It was just something that was done. And if he didn't use the toilet, we still didn't talk about it. And there were no consequences for anything. And we said, okay, we're going to take away the diapers. That's gone. And we're going to have many changes of clothing. And then we're going to do the same thing at home. And I said, okay. So then you got him at school. And what did you do at school?
So one of the strategies that I put into place that we also have to share with the audience, that you and I had many conversations about this and how we're going to implement it and what we're going to do. And I also had a lot of the case history behind it too, so that I could make an informed, educated decision on what strategies that I was going to use, and also using the evidence-based strategies that I had approached you with. So I'm all about that. So I take things that have been tried, tested, and true, understand how I'm going to use it and what parts of it I'm going to use if I'm not going to use the whole thing, and how I'm going to implement that. And so it started off with just generalized instructions, like everybody, where it's almost recess time, so we're all going to go use the washroom. So, and I just said to Peter, it's time to use the washroom, like everybody else. Let's go.
But you made him drink
That was
a
the
lot
other
of water before
a lot
he
of
went.
water.
And
Absolutely.
before anyone gets upset about how much water you made him drink, Peter can hold it for 24 hours and not go.
Yes. So that was where I knew I could push the boundaries because of the information that you gave me based on our, effective communication over here. So I started off with, between the first 2 periods and first recess, he drank a bottle of water, which I knew he had to do by lunch because of the added supplements that you have in the water for him because of his dietary needs. So I just sped up the process and said, first 2 periods, you're going to do this, drink a bottle of water. And he comes in from recess, he's hot and sweaty. I go, oh, you finished all your water. Let me top it up for you. Got him the second bottle of water. So period 3 and 4, he had the second bottle of water. And I'm talking about a liter water. And so come second recess, lunchtime, I knew he was squirming. Like all the body telltale signs were there, like I'm bursting, I
And
need
people
to go.
need to know that it's not like he didn't understand the concept of how to use the toilet. It's that he didn't want to do it.
Yep. He just did not want to do it. So we did this. And so by the time after second recess, I'm like, oh my goodness, you finished all your water. Because I knew if he didn't go to the washroom at school, he'd have to go at home. Either way, he had to go. It didn't matter where, and it didn't matter when, or I just knew he had to go. So he was drinking 3 bottles of water before he even got home. And so this continued, and every time, like, it was scheduled washrooms for everybody, Peter was included in the mix. It was a generalized instruction. It was not particularly aimed at him or requested of him. It was just routine. Everybody goes to the washroom. It's routine. And he would come home to you bursting to go to the toilet.
So he found a sort of one area where he would lean against a chair and sort of bend over and then pee. So I wouldn't talk to him about it. I didn't say, hey, you need to go use the water. There was nothing. If that's where he was going to go, that's where he was going to go. And of course, it was a lot of pee. So I had a towel ready there at that place to be able to catch it when he started to go. And he very quickly learned that towel was there, and he started putting the towel down on the floor first so that he could pee on the towel. And I was sitting there, and I saw him assume the position, and I just casually said to him while I was doing something else, I said, why don't you just go use the toilet? And he turned and he looked at me, and I could just see him out of the corner of my eye, but I didn't look up. No eye contact. I didn't. Nope. That's it. That's all I'm going to say. We're not talking about it. I'm not making a demand. Simple request. That's all. And he looked at me. I could see he was thinking about it. And then he walked into the washroom and he used the toilet. And he never didn't use the toilet again after that. It was like once it was done, that one time,
The cycle was broken.
that was it.
Yep.
And he never had an accident after that. And I didn't praise him for using the toilet that one time. It was completely neutral. I did not talk about it.
So from an educator's point of view, I was like, I have to stand my ground. Like, I know this might be a long battle, but with the strategies that I'm putting into place, it shouldn't be a long battle, because there's only so much water he can drink. And, and and I'm not going to praise him for it or make him feel embarrassed about it. I'm just like very nonchalant, like, oh, you've been doing it all your life. You've been going to the toilet. Like, so, and both of us did exactly the same thing.
And we both used the same language.
Same language, same tone, same approach. And God love him, he must be thinking, this woman is relentless. And my mother is relentless. And I cannot play one off against the other because they're both doing the same thing. And there's no escaping from this. And it's
From
like,
start to finish, it was what, maybe just 3 weeks?
Yep, absolutely.
And that was it. And it was over. And it was like, it was never not a thing. Like, it was just completely
Over and done
seamless.
with.
Yep.
Yep. And this was an example of effective communication. And also placing expectations that are on our kids of, like, just do it kind of thing.
But they're reasonable expectations. We knew he was capable. We knew he had an understanding of what he wanted, of what was to be done. He just wasn't doing it.
Yep.
Right.
And yeah, he was just stubborn about it, right? He was just point blank stubborn about it. So, which also kind of helps me think about other aspects of teaching strategies, right? On teaching our kids, no. Like, no, sorry, that's not good enough. Right?
So that brings us into an entirely different topic. And that's going to be
Absolutely.
our topic of discussion in the next one. The meaning of the word no, because that is a controversial issue right now. There's a lot of different parenting styles that have come out that are they do not incorporate the word no.
Absolutely. And I think the discussion that we're going to have is going to, once again, evidence-based, because that's what I'm all about. And God love the Aussies, they're 10 years ahead of us, okay? Australia and the UK, research is good 10 years above Canada. So kudos to the Aussies for this. Evidence-based research on why teaching our kids the word no is important, especially for kids with that are ASD or developmental disabilities. Or it's an amazing subject. It's an amazing topic, and I look forward to discussing that with you.
Me too. Well, thank you everybody for listening, and hopefully you'll tune in for that.
Absolutely.
Thanks for tuning in. If you know someone who might find this episode helpful, feel free to share. Also, check out our website and socials linked in the description.